The janitor who saved $1 billion empire, and the woman who ran it. If you enjoy stories about quiet men who refuse to stay invisible, women who fight for what's theirs, and the kind of love that grows out of ruin, please hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. Stay with me all the way to the end. You won't regret it. The announcement came at 9:17 in the morning, and by 9:19 the 38th floor of Halston Reed Tower sounded like a funeral for a company that wasn't dead yet. Ethan Calloway heard it before he saw it. He was on the 40th, pushing a yellow mop bucket down the long curve of the executive corridor, the wheels squeaking in a way that had been driving him quietly crazy for 7 months. He'd asked maintenance twice to swap the caster. Maintenance had laughed at him. Janitors didn't get to pick their buckets. He stopped at the glass wall that looked out over the lobby atrium 38 floors below and watched the bodies start to move. First a trickle, then a tide. People with boxes. People without boxes, because no one had warned them to bring a box. A woman in a navy blazer was crying into her phone against a marble pillar, not the hiding kind of crying, but the ugly kind, the kind where your shoulders shake and you don't care who sees. Ethan had seen that kind of crying before. He'd done it himself, exactly once, in a hospital parking lot at 2 in the morning 3 years ago. He didn't plan to do it again. He leaned his forearms against the handle of the mop and watched them go. "You hear?" a voice behind him said. He turned. It was Marcus, the other night shift holdover, who pulled doubles on Thursdays. Big man, late 50s, mustache the color of wet concrete. "Heard," Ethan said. "Chapter 11. Maybe Chapter 7. Nobody's sure yet." "When they're sure, we'll hear," Marcus snorted. "You're always like this, calm as a turtle." "Turtles aren't calm. They're just slow." "Yeah, well," Marcus scratched the side of his nose. "My wife's going to lose her mind. We got my grandson's birthday next Saturday." "Get him the birthday anyway," Ethan said. "With what, Calloway?" "With whatever you got. He's 5. He doesn't know the difference between a $50 train set and a $2 coloring book if you tell him it's the best coloring book in the world." Marcus looked at him for a long second. "Man, you got a hell of a way of making poverty sound like a choice." "I'm not making it sound like anything." Ethan pushed the mop forward again, the wheel singing its usual song. "I'm just saying his birthday's not the company's problem." He worked the corridor until 10, and then the 42nd, and then at 11 he took his unpaid 15 in the service stairwell with a cheese sandwich and a thermos of coffee that had gone lukewarm 2 hours ago. He drank it anyway. He'd learned the hard way that a janitor who went looking for a microwave in a building full of laid-off executives was a janitor asking to be seen as a symbol of something. And Ethan didn't do symbols. Ethan did sandwiches. He thought about his daughter. Maddie was 7. 7.5, she'd corrected him last Tuesday, with the kind of ferocity only a first grader can bring to the subject of half birthdays. She had her mother's dark hair and his stubborn chin and a gap in her front teeth she was weirdly proud of. She liked drawing horses. She was bad at drawing horses. Most of her horses came out looking like dogs with long necks, which she insisted was a new breed she'd invented. Ethan had framed 3 of them above his workbench in the kitchen. If the company went under, his paycheck went with it. The contract said his employer was Brightline Facility Services, not Halston Reed. But Brightline had exactly one client in this building, and that client was now apparently a ghost. You didn't need an MBA to do that math. He finished the sandwich. He screwed the cap back on the thermos. He went back to work. He saw her at 12:41. He knew the time because the big brass clock in the atrium chimed the 3/4 hour just as he stepped out of the service elevator, and she turned her head toward the sound like someone waking up underwater. Lila Hart. He knew her name the way the whole building knew her name. She was 29 years old, and 6 months ago she'd been a marketing vice president with a corner office 1 floor below the C-suite, and then her Uncle Donald Hart had stepped on a patch of black ice outside a restaurant in Denver and never woken up. And suddenly, the interim CEO nameplate on the door of the biggest office in the building read L. Hart in brushed steel. The first week, people had called her Miss Hart. The second week, they'd started calling her Ms. Hart. By the second month, most of them just called her her. She was standing in the middle of the lobby in a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Ethan's rent, and she was not moving. People flowed around her the way water flows around a rock. Her face was blank in a way that wasn't really blank. Ethan had been a father long enough to recognize the difference between a blank face and a face holding too much. He almost walked past her. He should have walked past her. There were 100 reasons to walk past her, and every single one of them was the same reason. He was a janitor, and janitors who stopped to talk to CEOs in the middle of a collapsing building did not have long or prosperous careers. But her hand was shaking. It was a small thing, her left hand, the one not holding the phone. It was down at her side, and her fingers were trembling in a slow, rhythmic way, and she was looking at the revolving door, not seeing it, and Ethan thought, she's about to fall, and nobody in this lobby is going to catch her. He changed direction. He didn't walk up to her. That would have been wrong for 10 different reasons. He walked past her, close enough that the corner of his cleaning cart bumped very gently against the base of the marble pillar next to her, and he bent down as if to pick up a piece of paper that wasn't there. And he said, without looking at her, "Ma'am, there's a bench about 15 feet behind you. I'd sit down if I were you. These floors get slippery when people are crying on them." He kept moving. He was 3 steps past her when she spoke. "Excuse me." Her voice was hoarse. He turned. Up close, she was smaller than she looked in the news photos. Tired eyes, good bones, a small smudge of mascara under her left lashes that she hadn't noticed yet. "Did you just—" she started, and then she stopped, and he watched her reassemble her face in real time, the way he'd watched senior executives do it 100 times in 100 hallways. "Thank you, that was— thank you." "Bench," he said. 15 feet? She almost smiled. It was barely a smile. It was the ghost of one. "I'll keep it in mind." He nodded and kept pushing his cart, and he did not look back because looking back would have been the wrong thing to do, and Ethan Calloway had made a career, such as it was, out of knowing exactly which things were the wrong things to do. At 3:15, the board issued a second statement. At 3:47, the security team began politely herding people off the executive floors. At 4:30, a memo went out to all remaining facility staff that the building would be on a skeleton schedule for the next 72 hours pending transition logistics, which was corporate English for, "we don't know what the hell we're doing yet." Ethan signed in for his second shift at 5 o'clock. The building at night was different. He liked it better. The phone stopped. The keyboard stopped. The whisper of 1,000 HVAC vents became the loudest sound in the world, and he could hear himself think for the first time in 12 hours. He moved through the empty conference rooms with his cart and his spray bottle and his roll of microfiber, and he wiped down the long walnut tables and emptied the wastebaskets full of shredded paper. And he tried very hard not to think about Maddie's school lunches, which cost $4 a day, which was $80 a month, which was a number he could no longer locate in his budget. He was in the conference room on 41. They called it the Oak Room, because somebody in 1994 had thought naming rooms after trees would make the company feel warmer. When he saw the binder, it was lying open on the table, upside down, like someone had slapped it there and walked out. A 1/4-inch thick 3-ring, black, with the Halston Reed logo embossed on the cover. The pages inside were the kind of financial spreadsheets Ethan had seen 1,000 times, the kind he wasn't supposed to read, the kind he definitely wasn't supposed to understand. He started to close it. He should have closed it. He stopped. There was a time, a long time ago, before Maddie and before the hospital parking lot and before the squeaky wheel on the mop bucket, when Ethan Calloway had been something else. Not somebody else. Something else. He'd gotten a full ride to a state school for accounting, and he'd finished it in 3.5 years instead of 4 because he'd needed to start earning. And he'd worked at a mid-sized firm in the city doing audit support for 4 years before Maddie's mother got sick, and then sicker, and then gone. And somewhere in the middle of all that, the career had become a thing he couldn't keep carrying. You couldn't leave a 6-month-old with a nanny when you were making $52,000 a year before taxes, and the nanny cost $41,000. You couldn't work 80-hour weeks when there was no one else on earth who was going to remember her pediatrician appointments. So he'd quit. He'd taken the first job he could find with night hours, because night hours meant he could be there when she woke up. He'd told himself it was temporary. That had been 6 years ago. But the eyes never stopped working. That was the thing. You could take a man out of accounting, but you could not teach his eyes to stop reading numbers. He leaned over the binder. It was a consolidated asset summary, dated 3 weeks ago, initialed in the bottom right corner by somebody whose handwriting looked like GT or maybe GF. A line item on page 4 had been circled in red pen, and then, in the margin, someone had written reclassify, see Amendment 4. Ethan frowned. The circled line item was labeled HRE Westcliff Holdings, long-term liability, $341,200,000. He stared at it for a long time. He turned the page. He turned another page. He found the amendment 6 pages later, a short note written in the same handwriting, stating that the Westcliff position had been reclassified from asset under partial divestiture to long-term liability pending resolution of counterparty obligations. Ethan read the note twice. He read it a third time. Then very slowly, he sat down in one of the black leather chairs at the end of the table because his legs had decided on their own that they weren't interested in holding him up for a minute. Westcliff Holdings was a real estate portfolio. He knew this because 6 months ago, he'd emptied the trash in this very room after a presentation about it, and the projector screen had still been showing a slide of the properties when he came in. 11 buildings, mostly in the Pacific Northwest, mostly fully leased. He remembered thinking at the time, idly, that the lease income on those things had to be colossal. You did not reclassify a fully leased, income-producing real estate portfolio from an asset to a liability. That wasn't an accounting choice. That was somebody pushing a red button marked "Do Not Push." Unless the counterparty obligations were genuinely catastrophic, which they might be. He didn't have enough of the picture, but there was another thing, and it was the thing that made his hands get cold. The total asset base of Halston Reed, according to the summary page he'd passed on page 2, was roughly $3.1 billion. Taking $341 million off the asset side and putting it on the liability side was a $682 million swing. A $682 million swing was the difference between a company that was viable and a company that wasn't. It was the exact kind of number that made a board decide, in a 9 o'clock meeting on a Tuesday morning, to file for bankruptcy. Ethan sat in the leather chair and stared at the binder and said softly, to no one at all, "No." Because he had also seen, 3 pages earlier, a footnote about the Westcliff portfolio's 2024 occupancy rate, 94%. You did not have a 94% occupied 11-building portfolio of Class A commercial real estate and classify it as a liability. You just didn't. The math didn't work. The world didn't work like that. Somebody had done something wrong, or somebody had done something on purpose. He closed the binder. He stood up. He was a janitor in a collapsing building at 7 o'clock at night, holding a piece of information that might or might not be the most important piece of information in the building, and he had no one on earth to give it to. Except Dad. He thought about it for 2 days. He thought about it while he made Maddie oatmeal on Wednesday morning, and she asked him why he was staring at the wall, and he said he was thinking about a puzzle, and she said puzzles were easy, and he just needed to find the corners first. He thought about it on the bus ride to her school. He thought about it through a long afternoon nap that refused to be a nap. He thought about it while he folded her laundry. He thought about it Thursday morning when he pulled up the news on his phone and read the headline, "Halston Reed to file by Friday, sources say." And he felt the floor of his stomach drop out the way it had dropped out in that hospital parking lot 3 years ago. Friday. That was tomorrow. Once they filed, it was over. You couldn't unfile a Chapter 11. You could emerge from one, eventually, maybe, with most of your people gone and most of your assets sold, but you couldn't go back to being the company you had been on Tuesday morning. He walked into the building Thursday at 4:57 p.m., and he clocked in, and he took his card out of the closet, and then he did something he had never done in 7 months of working in Halston Reed Tower. He rode the elevator to the 43rd floor, the executive floor, the top. He told himself as the elevator rose that he was just going to see if she was there. That was all. Just see. If the lights were off, he'd turn around. If security stopped him, he'd say he was checking on the floor. He had cleaning credentials. He had a badge. He had a reason to be there, technically, even if he'd never actually used that reason at this hour. The elevator opened on a dim, carpeted hallway. The lights were on half power, the way they went at night. The air smelled like eucalyptus, which was what the diffusers on this floor put out, because somebody thought eucalyptus was calming. Ethan privately thought eucalyptus smelled like cough drops, but nobody on the 43rd floor was asking him. He pushed the cart forward and made himself look like a man cleaning a floor. At the end of the hallway, one door was cracked open. Warm yellow lamplight spilled across the carpet. He heard a pen clicking, slow and rhythmic. Click, click, click. He stopped outside the door. He could see her through the gap. She was at the big desk, in a charcoal sweater now, instead of the cream coat. Her hair pulled back in a low tail, a bottle of water and a sandwich and 3 binders and 2 laptops open in front of her. She was not looking at any of them. She was looking at a point somewhere above the bookshelves on the far wall, her thumb working the pen, clicking, clicking, clicking. Ethan raised his hand and knocked on the door frame. She jerked as if he'd fired a gun. "Sorry," he said immediately, stepping back. "Sorry, I should have cleared my throat first." She stared at him. Her eyes were red. Not crying, right now red. Has been crying for 2 days red. "You're the man from the lobby," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You told me to sit down." "Yes, ma'am." "I didn't sit down." "No, ma'am, you didn't." A small, wrecked laugh came out of her. Was I that obvious?" "You weren't obvious. Your hand was shaking." She looked down at her hand, as if to check whether it was still there. "What are you doing on this floor?" she said. Not unkindly. Tired. And here it was. The moment. Ethan had practiced about 15 different opening sentences on the bus ride over, and every single one of them had sounded, when he tried it in his head, like the opening sentence of a crazy person. He decided to use none of them. "Ms. Hart," he said, "I need 3 minutes. I know what that sounds like. I know who I am, and I know who you are. But I found something. I think I found something. And if I'm wrong, you can have me walked out of this building tonight, and I won't say a word about it. But if I'm right, you don't file tomorrow." She went very still. People had been doing a lot of things to Lila Hart for 6 months, begging her, flattering her, lying to her, quitting on her. But nobody, in 6 months, had walked into her office in a gray janitor's shirt and told her not to file for bankruptcy. "Come in," she said, and closed the door. He came in. He closed the door. He stood at the edge of her desk, and he said, "The Westcliff portfolio." Her eyebrows drew together. 3 weeks ago, it was reclassified from an asset to a liability. That reclassification accounts for roughly $680 million of swing on the company's balance sheet. The portfolio is 94% occupied Class A commercial real estate. It should not be a liability. It shouldn't even be close to a liability. Something is wrong with the numbers, Ms. Hart. Something is badly wrong with the numbers. And if you file tomorrow, that wrongness becomes the public story of this company forever. She stared at him. He could feel his own pulse in his throat. "Where did you get this information?" she said. Quiet. Level. The voice of a woman who had learned in 6 months to never sound surprised in front of another human being. "A binder," Ethan said. "In the Oak Room, Tuesday night. Somebody left it open on the table. I was cleaning, and I used to do accounting a long time ago. It's the kind of thing you stop being able to not see." "You used to do accounting. 4 years at Marion and Vogel, audit support. I quit when my daughter's mother got sick. That was a while ago." Lila's pen had stopped clicking. "Sit down," she said. He sat down. She closed one of the laptops. She pulled the other one toward her. She typed for a long moment. Her eyes flicked back and forth across the screen, the way a person's eyes flick across a bad email they're reading for the second time. Without looking up, she said, "Do you know who initialed the reclassification memo?" "The handwriting looked like GT or GF. I couldn't tell." She kept typing. She stopped. She closed her eyes for a long second, and when she opened them again, there was something different in her face. Not hope, not yet, but something underneath hope, the thing hope grows out of when you're lucky, a kind of sharpening. "Gerald Finch," she said. "Excuse me?" "Gerald Finch, our chief restructuring officer. He joined us from an advisory firm 4 months ago to help manage the downturn." She said the word help, the way a person says a word they don't believe anymore. "His handwriting is GF. Ethan didn't say anything. "Mr. She stopped. "I'm sorry, I don't know your name." "Calloway. Ethan Calloway." "Mr. Calloway." She folded her hands on the desk, the way he imagined she folded them in board meetings, a small gesture of keeping herself in one piece. I would like you to understand something. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I am supposed to sign a stack of paperwork about a foot tall in a room full of lawyers. And once I sign that paperwork, the company my uncle built over 31 years stops existing in any meaningful sense. I have been told by 4 different advisors, including Gerald Finch, that signing is the only responsible option. I have been told this so many times, in so many different voices, that I had started to believe it was true. I had started to believe it was true about an hour before you knocked on my door. Ma'am? Do not ma'am me, Mr. Calloway. Not tonight. Tonight I need you to tell me one thing, and I need you to tell me the truth. Are you sure? He thought about it. Really thought. He thought about the binder, and the footnote about occupancy, and the strange margin note about Amendment 4, and the way a man named Gerald Finch, 4 months into the job, might stand to collect an enormous fee for orchestrating a restructuring. He thought about his daughter's school lunches. He thought about the squeaky wheel on the mop bucket. He thought about all the things he could lose between right now and tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I'm not sure, he said. She exhaled. It wasn't disappointment. It was something else. Relief, maybe. Good, she said. Because if you'd told me you were sure, I wouldn't have trusted you. I've had 4 months of people being sure. Sure is what got us here. She pulled one of the binders toward her. I'm going to need to see that document. The one in the oak room. Is it still there? As of Tuesday night, yes. I don't know about now. Then we go get it, you and me, right now. Ms. Hart. Lila. He paused. Lila, you cannot be seen walking around this building at night with a janitor looking for a binder. Why not? Because if somebody has been doing what you think they've been doing, they are watching this floor very carefully tonight. She looked at him. You know, she said, for a man who cleans bathrooms for a living, you think an awful lot like a person who used to read audit reports. I told you, the eyes don't stop working. She thought for a moment. Service elevator, she said. You take the service elevator, you go to the oak room, you take the binder, and you bring it up to the 42nd floor, into the smaller conference room. The one with the green walls, they call it the fern room, and I will meet you there in 20 minutes. I will come down a different way. And if Gerald Finch is working late tonight, her jaw set. He watched it happen. He watched the girl who had been frozen in the lobby 2 days ago become, in the slow pull of a single muscle, the woman who was going to run this company whether it survived or not. Then let him wonder, she said, what the CEO is doing in the fern room. He took the service elevator. His hands, he noticed, were steadier than they'd been in the lobby 2 days ago. Funny how that worked. When you had nothing to do, you shook. When you had something to do, you didn't. The oak room was dark. He flicked on the under-table lighting instead of the overheads. The binder was gone. For a second, his stomach dropped. Then he saw it, stacked on a credenza along the back wall with 6 other identical binders. Somebody, probably the cleaning sub who worked Wednesday mornings, had neatened up. Whoever it was hadn't known what they were touching. He found the binder with the red pen marking on page 4. He slid it into the large gray garbage bag hanging from the side of his cart, because a janitor carrying a bag looks like a janitor, and a janitor carrying a binder looks like a thief. He rode the elevator up 2 floors. The fern room had its lights off. He turned on one small lamp in the corner. He set the binder on the long table. He sat down in a chair and he looked at his hands, and for a long moment he thought about Maddie, asleep at Mrs. Acker's apartment across the hall, who watched her on his night shifts in exchange for $40 a week and a standing promise of snow shoveling all winter. He thought, if I get fired tonight, I will tell her it was a good shift. I will tell her I met a woman who was brave, and I gave her a piece of paper, and after that it wasn't my business anymore. The door opened. Lila slipped in and closed it behind her. She'd pulled a long black cardigan over the charcoal sweater. Her hair was still tied back. She was carrying a yellow legal pad and 3 pens. Show me, she said. He opened the binder. He turned to page 4. She bent over it. She did not sit down. She read it standing, her finger tracking under each line, her lips moving very slightly. When she got to the footnote about the 94% occupancy, her finger stopped. She stood up slowly. She looked at Ethan. Oh my God, she whispered. And then with a small startled laugh that had nothing to do with anything being funny, she said it again. Oh my God. She sank into the chair across from him. She put the legal pad down. She picked up a pen. She put the pen down. She pressed the heels of both hands into her eyes and made a small sound that wasn't a sob and wasn't a laugh. And Ethan, who had held his daughter through enough 3 a.m. fevers to know the difference between a person breaking down and a person breaking through, sat very still and did not say a word. After maybe 30 seconds, she took her hands away from her face. "Mr. Calloway," she said. Ethan, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to understand that I am asking it as the person who runs this company, not as the person in the lobby on Tuesday. Will you help me tonight figure out how deep this goes before 9 o'clock tomorrow morning?" He thought about Maddie. He thought about the $40 a week. He thought about all the things a janitor with a daughter was not supposed to risk. Then he thought, somebody left a binder on a table, and I was the only person in the building at the right hour with the right eyes. That's not nothing. That has to be something. "I'll help you," he said. She nodded once. She pulled the legal pad toward her. She wrote, at the top of the page in neat block letters, Westcliff. Who? Why? When? How? Stop. She looked up. "Okay," she said. "We have about 14 hours. Tell me everything you know about how a real estate portfolio gets reclassified as a liability." Ethan rolled up the sleeves of his gray janitor's shirt. "It's going to be easier," he said, "if I draw it." She slid the pad across the table. Outside the windows of the fern room, the city blinked on in its 1,000 colors, and 43 floors below, a woman in a navy blazer who had cried against a marble pillar 2 days ago was sitting on her couch in her apartment, telling her husband she didn't know what they were going to do. And somewhere in a high corner office on the 43rd floor, a man named Gerald Finch was pouring himself a second glass of bourbon and congratulating himself quietly on a very nearly finished piece of work. He did not yet know that 2 floors below him, under a single lamp, a janitor was drawing a picture on a yellow legal pad, and the woman who was going to sign his paperwork in the morning was leaning forward over the table, pen between her teeth, not signing anything. Not yet. He drew a box on the left side of the legal pad and labeled it Westcliff, 11 properties. He drew another box on the right and labeled it Halston Reed Balance Sheet. Between them, he drew an arrow, and on that arrow he wrote Lease Income. "Okay," he said, "start from the beginning. Commercial real estate portfolios come onto a company's books in one of 3 ways. You own them outright. That's 1. You hold them through a subsidiary. That's 2. Or you have a partnership interest with a counterparty, which is 3. Which one is Westcliff?" Lila was already flipping through one of the binders she'd brought in. She slid a tabbed document across the table. Partnership. We own 61%. The other 39 is a group called Kingsmore Pacific, out of Seattle. Who's Kingsmore Pacific? Family office, old money. They came in about 11 years ago when my uncle wanted capital to buy out the original developer. Ethan wrote Kingsmore, 39% on his legal pad. He underlined it twice. Are they cooperative or adversarial? They're Uncle Don's friends. We're his friends. The patriarch is a man named Walter Kingsmore, mid-70s, still sharp as anything. He came to the funeral. He held my hand for 10 full minutes and told me to call him if anything ever felt wrong. Her voice caught slightly on wrong. She reached for her water bottle and drank. I did not call him. I did not know what would qualify as wrong. This qualifies. I'm aware. Ethan pulled the binder toward him and found Amendment 4 again, the short type note about the reclassification. He read it out loud, slowly. The Westcliff position has been reclassified from asset under partial divestiture to long-term liability pending resolution of counterparty obligations. That last phrase, counterparty obligations, that's what I want you to look at. Kingsmore. Kingsmore is the only counterparty. So somebody is saying there's an obligation the company owes Kingsmore, big enough to eat the entire asset value of 61% of 11 buildings. Do you know of any such obligation? Lila was quiet. Do you know, Ethan said again, carefully, of any obligation to Kingsmore Pacific that would be big enough to do that? I know what my books say, she said. My books say we owe them a preferred return on their capital contribution. At the rate it's been running, it's maybe 12, 14 million a year. That's not 340 million. That's not even close to 340 million. Right. She set down the water bottle. So either there's an obligation I don't know about, or there isn't one. and someone is pretending there is. Those are the two doors, Ethan said. We have to open both of them before 9 a.m. Okay? She was writing now, fast, the pen scratching. Okay. If there's a real obligation I don't know about, it would exist in a side letter or an amended partnership agreement. Those don't always live in the main data room. Those sometimes live in the general counsel's office or in a private file with the CFO. Who's the CFO? A woman named Priya Ramesh. She's been with us 18 years. My uncle trusted her the way a man trusts his own hand. Lila paused. She's also been on bereavement leave for the last 9 days. Her mother died in Mumbai. Ethan looked up. 9 days. Since the 11th. And Gerald Finch has been running the restructuring meetings by himself for 9 days. Lila set her pen down. He watched her do the math behind her eyes. It took her maybe 4 seconds. When she lifted her face again, there was a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. That is, she said slowly, a very interesting window of time. It's the window, Ethan said. Whatever this is, it was walked through that window. Priya would never. I'm not saying Priya. I'm saying while Priya is out. Understood. She stood up and paced to the window and back. The hem of the long cardigan swung around her knees. She was wearing running shoes, he noticed, not the heels from the lobby. Somewhere between 2 days ago and tonight she had started dressing for a fight. Here's what I know, she said, not looking at him, looking out at the city. Gerald Finch came in as Chief Restructuring Officer on a performance-weighted contract. His firm gets a base fee of $1.2 million for the engagement, plus a completion bonus tied to, and I want you to hear this, the magnitude of the restructuring achieved. Meaning the worse the company looks going in, Ethan said, the bigger his bonus coming out. Potentially up to $7 million, yes. Good Lord. He has structured 3 prior restructurings at other mid-caps. All 3 were successful, meaning the companies survived in a diminished form, and the shareholders got about 20 cents on the dollar. He was very proud of those. He came in here with a slide deck about them. Who else benefits if you file tomorrow? She turned back from the window. That, she said, is the other question I should have been asking for 3 weeks. She sat down again. She pulled a fresh page on the legal pad, and at the top of it she wrote, Who benefits? Underneath, in her fast, narrow handwriting, G. Finch, bonus, Kingsmore, short sellers, competitors, Marquardt Industrial, Myers Capital. Ethan watched her write. Her hand was not shaking anymore. It had not shaken, he realized, since the moment he had opened the binder and put his finger under the circled line item. Lila, he said. Yes, I want to say something, and I want you to take it seriously. All right? If somebody is doing this on purpose, and they realize we know we are in a building with them right now, and we are 2 people on the wrong side of a locked door. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone, opened a text thread, and typed for about 40 seconds. She set the phone down and turned it face up so Ethan could read it. Martin, I need you in the building tonight. Main lobby, 20 minutes. Don't come up, don't call, don't tell anyone. I'll explain when you get here. Ethan read it. He looked at her. Who's Martin? Martin Obi, head of corporate security, ex-Army, served with my uncle's oldest friend. He has been in this building for 22 years and he does not like Gerald Finch. Does he like you? A small, crooked smile. He taught me to change a tire when I was 16. Good, Ethan said. Good. The phone buzzed. She turned it to read the response. On my way. She put the phone down. Okay, she said. Now we have a third person who knows. That's as many as we can afford tonight. Everyone else is a risk. She looked at the binder, the legal pad, the scatter of ink on the table. Where do we start? Ethan thought. With the buildings, he said. If Westcliff is really worth what it says it's worth on the old asset sheet, then somewhere there is a recent appraisal. A real one. Commercial real estate at that scale, so the bank that holds any of the mortgages requires annual appraisals. Any lender would. Do you have banking relationships on the Westcliff portfolio? 2. Pacific Corridor Trust and First Meridian. Call one of them in the morning, but tonight we need the appraisal document. Where would it be? General Counsel's office, 43rd floor, 3 doors down from mine. Is it locked? It's always locked. Do you have access? She thought. I have a master, in theory. I have never used it. Tonight, Ethan said, you use it. They went together. It was just past 9. The 43rd floor was dim and empty, the way only the very top of a very large building can be empty at night, the kind of quiet where your own breathing sounds like somebody else's. Lila walked ahead. Ethan walked behind her with the cleaning cart, because a cleaning cart was still the best cover in the world. The general counsel's office was at the end of the hall, past a glass wall, etched with the Halston Reed logo. His name was stenciled on the door in small gold letters. Robert A. Finnegan, EVP and General Counsel. Under it, in newer print, an addition had been made 2 months ago. On sabbatical. Return March. He's on sabbatical too, Ethan said. He's been on sabbatical since October. His wife is sick. Who's running legal? An outside firm, Dashwood and Kale, Finch's choice. Ethan set the card against the wall. Lila pulled a small plastic fob from a pocket inside her cardigan and held it up to the reader. The reader thought about it for a second. Then it beeped, green, and the lock popped. The office smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and old paper. 2 tall filing cabinets stood against the far wall. Ethan went to them. Lila went to the desk and began opening drawers, fast and quiet. What am I looking for? She whispered. Anything labeled Westcliff, Kingsmore, or partnership. Anything dated within the last 18 months. Appraisals should come in the form of a bound report, usually blue or gray cover, 40 to 60 pages. She pulled open the second drawer. Calloway. Yeah. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer fast because we don't have time for long answers. Okay. Why are you helping me? He kept looking through the cabinet. There was a file marked Westcliff, Refinance 2023, and another marked Kingsmore Correspondence. He pulled them both. Because somebody left a door open for me to see this, he said, and I don't know how to walk past an open door when there's a fire on the other side of it. That's a good answer. It's an honest one. I don't know if it's good. He turned. She was holding a thick blue-covered bound report. On the cover, in silver lettering, it read, Westcliff Holdings Portfolio. Appraisal of Market Value. Prepared by Vesper Commercial Advisors, June of last year. Oh, she said softly. How thick is it? 1.5 inches. Open to the summary page. Should be the 4th or 5th page in. She flipped. Her finger found the page. He watched her read. He watched her face. She closed the report. Tell me, Ethan said. $894 million, she said. The market value of the portfolio. As of June of last year. $894 million. Our 61% share would be $545 million. That's the asset. That's the asset. Which Gerald Finch reclassified as a $341 million liability. Yes. That's not an accounting dispute, Ethan said. That's not an aggressive interpretation. That's a lie. Yes, she said again. Her voice had gone very quiet. That's a lie. She tucked the appraisal under her arm. She turned off the lamp on the desk. They left the office exactly the way they'd found it, and she pulled the door shut behind her, and the lock clicked, and in the empty hallway her face in the half-light was not the face Ethan had seen 2 days ago in the lobby, or an hour ago in her office. It was a harder face, a face that had crossed into a different country. Fern room, she said. They went. Jack. Martin Obie was waiting for them when they came out of the service stairwell onto 42. He was a big man, maybe 6'3", his dark head shaved clean, wearing a navy blazer over a white shirt with no tie. He stood up from the chair outside the fern room the way a soldier stands up, not fast but without wasted motion. Ms. Hart. Martin. This is Ethan Calloway, cleaning staff. Tonight he is the most important person in this building, and I want you to treat him like he is. Martin Obie considered Ethan for maybe 3 seconds. Then he nodded once. Mr. Calloway. Mr. Obie. Inside, Lila said. They went in. She closed the door. Then, after a beat, she crossed the room and pulled the heavy green curtains shut over the window, which Ethan hadn't realized were there. The city disappeared. Sit down, Martin. I'll stand. Sit down, Martin. He sat. She laid the appraisal on the table. She laid the binder next to it. She opened both to the relevant pages. Then she stood in the middle of the room with her arms folded, and she told him, in clean, plain, unhurried English, what she and Ethan had found in the last 2 hours. Martin Obi did not say a word until she was finished. When she finished, he said, "Who else knows?" "Us three. That's it. Maybe Priya, but Priya's in Mumbai burying her mother, and I'm not calling her." Gerald Finch. "Does not know we know." "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be in a building with 600 cameras I don't control." Martin rubbed a hand along his jaw. "All right, here's what I'm going to say, and I want both of you to hear me, because once we go past this next hour, we are not going to get to unsay anything. Go. You have 3 problems. You have a numerical problem, which is the reclassification. You have an intent problem, which is whether Finch did it on purpose or whether he did it stupidly. And you have a timing problem, which is that there is a board meeting in," he looked at his watch, 11 hours and 43 minutes, and in that meeting the board is going to sign off on a filing that will destroy the company. The numerical problem is fixable in an afternoon. The intent problem takes a forensic accountant 2 weeks. The timing problem has no solution except to solve it tonight." "Agreed," Lila said. "Which means," Martin said, "you cannot bring a bomb into that boardroom without a fuse already burning. You cannot walk in at 9 a.m. and say, 'Everybody stop, I think something is wrong. A janitor found a binder.' They will table you. They will pat you on the head. They will file by lunchtime. And you will be the CEO who let a janitor—" He glanced at Ethan apologetically. "You will be the CEO who let an outsider read your books." "So what does the fuse look like?" Ethan said. Martin looked at him. "The fuse," Martin said, "is Kingsmore Pacific." Lila's head came up. "If Walter Kingsmore walks into that meeting at 8:50 in the morning," Martin said, "and sits down next to you and says, 'I own 39% of the asset Mr. Finch is claiming is a liability, and I have come to object,' the entire room changes in 30 seconds. The board is not going to file a Chapter 11 over the objection of a 40% partner whose asset has been moved to the wrong side of the ledger. Nobody on that board wants to be deposed in a fraud case next year." "It's almost 10 o'clock at night," Lila said. "Walter Kingsmore is 77 years old," Martin said. "He goes to bed at 9:30. But if you call his daughter Evelyn, and I have her cell number because she used to work security for us in 2009, she will wake him up for this." Lila stared at him. "You have Evelyn Kingsmore's cell number?" "I have a lot of numbers, Ms. Hart. It's my job." "Martin Obi," Lila said, "I'm going to triple your salary." "Ms. Hart, please don't say things you can't afford." "I am going to double your salary." "That I believe." Ethan, despite everything, despite the binder and the cold clench in his stomach and the knowledge that every passing minute was a minute he couldn't take back, felt a small, unexpected thing happen in the corner of his mouth. A half smile. The first one of the night. "Moss." Lila called Evelyn Kingsmore at 9:47. Ethan could only hear Lila's half of the conversation. It went like this. "Evelyn, it's Lila Hart. I know it's late. I would not be calling if it weren't urgent. Yes, listen to me. I need to speak to your father tonight. I need him to put on a jacket and come to my office before 9 tomorrow morning. I need him to hear from me in person that someone inside this company has falsified a line item involving Westcliff, and I need him, as the minority partner, to come to my board meeting and object to the filing. No, I cannot do this by email. Evelyn, I am going to say something and I am going to hang up, and I want you to decide because your father trusted my uncle, and my uncle is not here to ask. Here it is. If your father does not come to this meeting, your family is going to lose $170 million by lunchtime tomorrow because the buyer who is going to pick over the carcass of this company has already been lined up. I do not yet know by whom, but I know that. Wake him up." She hung up. She stood with the phone in her hand for a moment. Then she put it face down on the table and turned to Ethan and Martin and said very calmly, "I think I'm going to throw up now." "Bathroom's through that door," Ethan said. "I'm not actually going to." "Okay? I just want to." "Understood." Martin had already taken out a small notepad and was writing. "While you're deciding whether to throw up, Ms. Hart, let me work. I want to pull camera footage from the 43rd floor for the last 3 weeks. Specifically, anytime Gerald Finch was in the CFO's office, the general counsel's office, or the document storage room on 44. If he accessed any of those rooms after hours, we will have it. Is that legal? He signed a consent when he was hired. All senior hires do. It's on page 19 of the onboarding packet. Do it. Pull everything. I also want to call a friend at Vesper Commercial Advisors, who did the appraisal, and ask him to meet me at his office at 6 a.m. with a notary and the original signed copy of the report. I want to present the original document, not a photocopy, to the board. Go. Martin stood up. I'll come back at 5:30. Get some sleep if you can. I can't. Pretend. Even closing your eyes helps. He looked at Ethan. Mr. Calloway, if you get harassed by anyone in this building between now and 7 a.m., anyone at all, you come and find me. I will be in the basement with the footage. Don't argue with anybody. Don't explain anything. Come and find me. Yes, sir. Martin left. The fern room fell silent. Lila sat down slowly in the chair across from Ethan. The long cardigan pooled around her. She looked, suddenly, very young. He had been thinking of her as a CEO for 2 hours, and he had forgotten that she was 29 years old and had inherited a company she was never supposed to run. Ethan, she said. Yes. I want to ask you something that's none of my business. Okay. Your daughter. He waited. You said your daughter's mother got sick. That's why you left the firm. That's right. How old was your daughter? 4 months. She closed her eyes. Ethan, how old is she now? 7.5. As of last Tuesday. She's very clear about the half. A small sound from Lila, something between a laugh and a thing that was not a laugh. Where is she tonight? With my neighbor across the hall, a widow named Mrs. Acker. She watches Maddie every time I work a night shift. Maddie's got her own pillow over there and a toothbrush in a yellow cup. Mrs. Acker sounds very nice. She is very nice. She is 71 years old, and she drinks 2 cans of root beer a day, and she does not believe in plants. That is the only disagreement she and I have ever had. Lila laughed. A real laugh this time, short and tired. Plants. I tried to give her a pothos once. She acted like I'd handed her a snake. You're trying to distract me. A little. It's working. A little. He looked at her across the table, across the binder, across the appraisal report and the legal pad and all the quiet weight of the last 4 hours, and he said, Lila, you're going to be okay tonight. Whatever happens in the morning, tonight you did the right thing. You listened when somebody you had no reason to listen to knocked on your door. A lot of people would not have done that. A lot of people, she said, would have had me escorted out of the building for what I did tonight. No, a lot of people wouldn't have even noticed I was a person in the lobby. The fact that you remembered me 48 hours later means you were already half the person who was going to figure this out. I just gave you the other half. She looked down at the appraisal report. My uncle used to say, she said slowly, that the most dangerous thing in any company was a man who thought he was invisible. He said, Lila, keep an eye on the people nobody watches, because they're the ones who see everything, and eventually either they help you or they hurt you, and you want to make sure it's help. Your uncle sounds like a smart man. He was a smart man. He was also a bad father, but that's a different story. Ethan didn't ask. She noticed him not asking. She seemed to appreciate it. After a minute, she said, Are you tired? Yes. Is there coffee in this building at 10 at night? There's a pot I keep in a supply closet on 39. It's not good. Is it coffee? Technically. Make us some, please. He went to 39 and made the coffee. It was worse than he'd remembered. He brought it up in 2 ceramic mugs he found in the break room, and she drank hers without a word of complaint, which told him a great deal about her. Walter Kingsmore arrived at 11:08 in the night, driven by his daughter Evelyn, in a black wool overcoat that he had clearly pulled on over pajamas. He was small for a rich man, white-haired, bright-eyed, with the kind of alert, unsurprised expression that men of a certain age wear when they have stopped being surprised by anything. Evelyn, 40-ish, in a track jacket, kissed Lila on both cheeks, and then said to Ethan, I don't know who you are, but my father wants to shake your hand. Ethan stood. Walter Kingsmore came across the room slowly, but not weakly, and took Ethan's hand in both of his. His hands were warm and very dry, like paper. Young man, he said, Evelyn tells me you are the reason I am not asleep. Yes, sir. What do you do for the company? I clean the building, sir. Walter looked at him. Walter looked at Lila. Walter looked back at Ethan. My friend Donald Hart used to say that the measure of any enterprise was how its leaders treated the people whose names they didn't know. He paused. I have been in a lot of buildings in my life, Mr. Calloway. Ethan Calloway. Mr. Calloway. A great many buildings. I have almost never been in one where the right thing was found by the person everyone else walked past. Would you sit with me and tell me what you found? Yes, sir. They sat. Ethan went through it again, slower this time, the binder and the reclassification and the appraisal. Walter listened the way a man listens to a doctor. He did not interrupt. He did not nod too much. He did not ask a single stupid question. When Ethan was done, Walter sat for a long moment with his fingers steepled against his chin. Then he said, Lila. Yes, Uncle Walter. I'm going to be at your board meeting tomorrow morning at 8:45. I will come in the side door. I would like Evelyn to come with me. She will take notes. I will speak for perhaps 2 minutes, and then I will ask Gerald Finch a question. And after he answers that question, I would like Mr. Obie to be in the room with the camera footage he has not yet finished pulling. He glanced at his watch. He has 6.5 hours. That should be sufficient. Yes. After the meeting, I would also like to meet Mr. Calloway's daughter. Ethan blinked. Sir? Not at the meeting. After. Whenever is convenient. My wife and I have a house on the coast. It has ponies. My great-granddaughter rides one. If your daughter draws horses the way you describe, I suspect she will want to meet a real one. Ethan stared at him. I didn't tell you she draws horses. Lila told me on the phone, Evelyn said from the doorway, amused. We were on speaker. Apparently it was a very long phone call. Ethan looked at Lila. Lila had the good grace to look a little caught. You told him about her horses, he said. I may have. Between the fraud and the bankruptcy. Somewhere in the middle. I was nervous. Ms. Hart. I'm sorry, Ethan. No, don't be sorry. It's just... He didn't know how to finish the sentence. He had been in this building for 7 months, and nobody in this building, not one single person, had known he had a daughter. He had made sure of that. A janitor with a sick story was a janitor people felt bad for, and feeling bad for somebody was the first step in not seeing them anymore. And now an old man in a pajama top under an overcoat wanted to introduce his daughter to a pony. It's fine, he said. It's a nice offer. Thank you, sir. We will discuss it when all this is behind us, Walter said. He patted Ethan's hand once, the gentle, heavy hand of an old man. Tonight, we have work. They worked. Martin came back at 5:25 with 3 USB drives and a printed timeline. He'd been in the basement security office since 10:40. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. The footage, he said, was conclusive. Gerald Finch had entered the CFO's office at 11:47 p.m. on the 6th, 2 days after Priya Ramesh had flown to Mumbai, using a badge that was not his. He had been inside for 41 minutes. On the 8th, he had entered the General Counsel's document storage room at 9:12 p.m. and had not emerged until 10:03. On the 12th, he had been captured briefly, walking out of the print room on 42 carrying a black 3-ring binder matching the one now sitting on the fern room table. Whose badge had he used? An intern's. A 22-year-old named Hannah Pell, who had rotated off the restructuring team 9 days ago and whose access had not yet been deactivated. Clever, Lila said quietly. Not clever enough, Martin said. He swiped her badge at the security desk on the 9th and had it on him when he entered the CFO's office on the 6th. The timestamps don't match. He must have cloned the fob. That's a crime. That is several crimes. At 6:10, a man named Douglas Heller from Vesper Commercial Advisors arrived in the lobby with a notarized original of the Westcliff appraisal and a puzzled expression. Martin brought him up. He shook hands all around. He confirmed, on the record, with his notary stamp, that the portfolio had been appraised at $894 million, and that no update, revision, or impairment had been filed since. At 6:45, Lila's assistant Gabrielle arrived early and was told, gently but firmly, by Lila herself, that today she would not be running the calendar. Today she would be standing outside the main conference room and allowing no one in until Lila said. At 7:15, Ethan slipped out the side door of the tower, went 3 blocks east to the bus stop, took the bus 4 stops, let himself into his apartment, walked across the hall in his socks, and picked up his still sleeping daughter from the couch in Mrs. Acker's living room. Maddie mumbled something about horses as he carried her back across. He laid her in her bed. He kissed her forehead. He wrote her a note on the back of an envelope that said, "I had to go back to work for a big thing today. Mrs. Acker will take you to school. I will be home before dinner. I love you. Daddy." He left it on the kitchen table, leaning against the salt shaker where she always looked. He caught the bus back at 7:50. At 8:30, he was back in the Fern Room, showered, in a clean-pressed shirt and the only blazer he owned, which he had bought for a funeral 3 years ago and had worn exactly once since. He felt ridiculous in it. He felt ridiculous without it. He kept it on. Leela came in at 8:35. She had changed. She was wearing a dark blue suit, the jacket sharp across the shoulders, her hair down now, clean and pinned back at the sides. She had put on lipstick. It was the first time Ethan had seen her look like a photograph of herself. "Ethan." "Lila." She stopped in front of him. She looked at him for a long second. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything." "If we lose," she said, "if we lose in the next 20 minutes, I want to have thanked you first, just in case." "Then you're welcome. Just in case." She held his eyes for one more beat. Then she nodded, turned, and walked out of the room toward the boardroom down the hall. Ethan stood at the window of the Fern Room. He had pulled the curtain back. The city was waking up in its pale winter light, gray buildings and yellow headlights, and a single small plane crossing the sky, silent from this high up. Somewhere down below, his daughter was eating cereal at Mrs. Acker's kitchen table and telling her about a horse she had invented whose name was Pancake. He closed his eyes for a second. He thought, if this goes wrong, they will know by 9:15 that a janitor was behind it, and I will be out of this building by 9:30, and I will not have a job, and my daughter will not have school lunch money next week. Then he thought, and I still would have done it. He opened his eyes. He watched the plane cross the sky until it was gone. Down the hall, the boardroom doors were closing, and Walter Kingsmore was taking a seat next to Lila Hart, and Gerald Finch, who did not yet know he was inside a trap, was reaching for his first cup of coffee of the morning, and Martin Obie was standing outside the door with 3 USB drives in the inside pocket of his navy blazer and a face so carefully blank you would have thought, looking at him, that nothing at all was about to happen. The boardroom on 43 was long and low-ceilinged, paneled in dark walnut, with one wall of glass that looked east toward the river. 15 chairs around the table, 12 of them filled. 3 empty seats at the far end, which Gerald Finch took to mean that the usual stragglers were running late and which Lila Hart had arranged, by name card, to remain empty until she said otherwise. Gerald Finch was 48 years old, thick through the shoulders, with graying hair cut short at the sides, and a careful, expensive tan that said he spent his weekends somewhere other than his desk. He wore a charcoal suit and a navy tie, and the faint, pleasant cologne of a man who had been married twice and was working on a third. He sat 2 chairs down from the head of the table, where he had been sitting for 9 days, because he had politely suggested during his first board meeting that it was probably easier if he handled the restructuring presentation from the center rather than making Ms. Hart walk around for the slides. Lila took her seat at the head. She set down a thin leather portfolio. She did not open it. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning, Ms. Hart," said a chorus of 9 directors. "Before we begin," Lila said, "I'd like to introduce a guest. Walter, please come in." The side door opened. Walter Kingsmore walked into the room. The effect on Gerald Finch was small, but not small enough. His hand, which had been reaching for the coffee cup in front of him, stopped for about 3/4 of a second. Then it kept moving, and he picked up the cup, and he sipped from it, and he set it back down without a sound. Ethan was not in the room. Ethan was in the Fern Room, 2 floors down, because Lila had asked him not to be present. "If this goes badly for me," she had said, "I don't want it to have gone badly for you in front of 15 other people too." He had argued, briefly. She had not yielded. So he was standing at the Fern Room window instead, with a cup of cold coffee in his hand, watching his own reflection watch the glass. What he could not see, but what he would later piece together from 3 accounts. Lila's, Walter's, and the transcript Martin Obie would produce from the ceiling microphones that were always recording in that room, and that Gerald Finch, who had signed the same consent form as everyone else, had forgotten about, was this. Walter Kingsmore did not sit down immediately. He stood behind the empty chair at the foot of the table, and he said, in the gentle, mild voice of a man who had long since given up raising it, "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Walter Kingsmore. I represent Kingsmore Pacific, the 39% partner in the Westcliff Holdings portfolio. I am sorry to intrude on your meeting. I have been informed by Ms. Hart at approximately 11 last night that a very serious error has been made on the company's books regarding our joint asset. Before any action is taken by this board today, I would like that error corrected on the record. With your permission, I will sit down." He sat down. The directors looked at each other. At the other end of the table, Gerald Finch smiled, pleasantly, the way a man smiles when he has decided that the correct response to a surprise is to treat the surprise as a misunderstanding. "Walter," he said. "Mr. Kingsmore, I am so glad you're here. I was actually planning to reach out to you later this week. I think there may have been some miscommunication." "Mr. Finch," Lila said, "Ms. Hart, I would like to run this meeting if you don't mind." He inclined his head. "Of course. My apologies." "Thank you." She opened the leather portfolio. She removed 3 documents. She laid them on the table in front of her, one by one, like cards. "I have with me this morning," she said, 3 items I would like the board to see before we discuss any filing. Item 1 is the restructuring memorandum prepared by Mr. Finch, dated the 2nd of this month, in which he reclassifies the Westcliff portfolio from a long-term asset to a long-term liability on the basis of what he describes as unresolved counterparty obligations. She slid the binder to the center of the table. Item 2 is the most recent professional appraisal of the Westcliff portfolio, completed in June of last year by Vesper Commercial Advisors, a respected independent firm valuing the portfolio at $894 million in total, with our 61% share valued at approximately $545 million. She slid the blue appraisal report to the center of the table. And item 3, she said, is a photocopy of the badge access log for this building for the period between the 6th and the 14th of this month, which was provided to me this morning by Mr. Obie in corporate security. She slid the 3rd document. The room was very quiet. Gerald Finch had stopped smiling. "Ms. Hart," he said carefully, "I would like to state for the record that these are very serious. I haven't asked you a question yet, Mr. Finch. When I ask you a question, you may answer it. Until then, I'm going to ask you to be quiet." He stared at her. She stared back. She was, Walter Kingsmore would later tell Ethan over a cup of tea in the old man's sunroom on the coast, the closest thing to her Uncle Donald he had seen in 3 decades. "Now," Lila said, "I would like to ask the board to turn to page 4 of the binder in front of you. Mr. Harrison, as board chair, would you do the honors of reading the circled line item out loud?" Alan Harrison was 71, a retired airline executive, bald, soft-spoken, the kind of man who chaired 3 boards the way other men played 3 rounds of golf. He opened the binder. He found page 4. He pushed his glasses up his nose. HRE, Westcliff Holdings, long-term liability, $341.2 million. "Thank you. Now please turn to the margin note." He turned. "Reclassify. See Amendment 4. "Thank you. Now, Mr. Finch, I'd like you to answer a question. Whose handwriting is that?" Gerald Finch looked at her. "I have been looking," Lila said, "at initialed memoranda from the restructuring project for 3 weeks. I recognize your handwriting, Mr. Finch. Everyone at this table recognizes your handwriting, so I would appreciate it if you did not waste our time." A long pause. "It's mine," Gerald Finch said. "Thank you. Now please walk us through the basis for the reclassification." He straightened in his chair. He folded his hands on the table. "Certainly," he said. "The Westcliff position, as the board is aware, is a partnership interest. Partnership interests in commercial real estate are subject to complex obligations, and in my view, after extensive analysis, Mr. Finch, yes. What obligation?" "Excuse me? What specific obligation," Lila said, "caused you to reclassify $545 million of asset as $341 million of liability? Be specific. Cite the document." Gerald Finch looked at the binder. He looked at the appraisal. He looked, for a brief and terrible moment, at Walter Kingsmore. Walter Kingsmore was not looking back at him. Walter Kingsmore was looking at his own hands folded on the table with the calm patience of a man who had all morning. The obligation, Finch said slowly, arises from a preferred return provision in the partnership agreement, which, in the event of the preferred return on the Kingsmore capital contribution, Lila said, accrues at roughly $12 to $14 million annually. It is current. It has been paid every quarter since the partnership was formed. Mr. Kingsmore, would you confirm? I confirm, Walter said mildly. So where, Lila said, does $341 million come from? Gerald Finch opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. This is not, he said, the appropriate forum for this level of technical detail. I would be happy to provide a full memorandum to the board by end of day. Mr. Finch, you were planning to have this board sign a bankruptcy filing at 10:30 this morning. You have had 3 weeks to prepare the technical detail. You have had 30 seconds to cite a single source document for a $680 million swing on the balance sheet. You cannot do it, can you? He did not answer. Mr. Harrison, Lila said, I would like to call Mr. Martin Obie into the room. Alan Harrison nodded. The main door opened. Martin Obie came in. He was still in the navy blazer. He was carrying a slim black laptop and the 3 USB drives in a small velvet pouch that he set on the table with the gentle respect he would have given a piece of evidence in a trial. Mr. Obie, Lila said, would you please tell the board what you found in the security camera footage for the nights of the 6th, the 8th, and the 12th of this month? Martin cleared his throat. On the night of the 6th, he said, at 11:47 p.m., Mr. Finch entered the office of Priya Ramesh, Chief Financial Officer, using the badge of an intern named Hannah Pell. He was inside for 41 minutes. On the night of the 8th at 9:12 p.m., he entered the document storage room of the General Counsel, again using Ms. Pell's badge. He was inside for 51 minutes. On the 12th, at approximately 7 in the evening, he was captured on a camera in the hallway of the 42nd floor, carrying a black 3-ring binder matching the one currently in front of Mr. Harrison. Is Hannah Pell here this morning? No, Ms. Hart. She rotated off the project 9 days ago. I spoke with her at 6:15 this morning. She confirmed that her badge was misplaced on the afternoon of the 5th, that she reported it to HR on the 6th, and that she was issued a replacement on the 7th. She is willing to sign an affidavit. I have it drafted. Martin held up a printed page. Lila held out her hand. He walked it over. She set it on the table next to the other 3 documents. She did not say anything. The silence in the room was very large. Gerald Finch's face had done a thing. His careful tan was still there. His good suit was still there. But the face inside them had collapsed slightly, the way a man's face collapses when he realizes he has been walking for the last hour toward a cliff rather than a door. Ms. Hart, he said. Yes, Mr. Finch. I would like to request a recess. I would like to consult with counsel. This is not a court, Mr. Finch. You are welcome to leave the room at any time, but the board is going to vote in the next 10 minutes, and I would prefer that you remain. May I speak? You may. He stood up. He pulled at his tie. I do not, he said. I do not know what Mr. Obie believes he saw on those tapes. I do not know why an intern's badge was used on the nights in question. I can tell you, categorically, that I did not. Mr. Finch, Martin Obie said quietly, I have your face on the footage. I did not say that a badge was used. I said that you used a badge. You are wearing the same tie this morning that you were wearing on the night of the 6th. It is a distinctive tie. Gerald Finch looked down at his tie. He sat back down, very slowly. I would like to confer with my attorney, he said. Of course, Lila said. You are free to leave this room. When you leave, Mr. Obie will escort you to your office, where you will collect your personal items under his supervision. Your badge will be deactivated before you reach the elevator. The question of whether this matter is referred to the United States Attorney is one the board will decide this afternoon with the advice of outside counsel, who will not be the firm you retained. That is all. He stood up again. He looked around the room slowly at each director in turn, as if hoping someone would meet his eyes. No one did. He walked out. Martin Obie walked out with him, 2 steps behind, the way a bodyguard walks behind a man who does not yet know he has become a prisoner. The door closed. The room exhaled. Alan Harrison, the board chair, lowered his glasses onto the table and looked at Lila Hart for a long moment with an expression that was neither friendly nor unfriendly. "Ms. Hart," he said, "would you care to tell this board how you came to possess this information in the last—" He checked his watch. 14 hours. Lila took a breath. "Mr. Harrison," she said, "that is a question I am going to answer honestly. I came into this information last night, shortly before 8 o'clock, when an employee of the company brought a concern to my office. I vetted the concern over the next several hours with the help of Mr. Obie and an independent appraiser. I woke Mr. Kingsmore up at 11. I brought the matter to this board at the first available opportunity, which is now." "Which employee?" "A member of our facilities team." Alan Harrison blinked. "A janitor." "Yes, Mr. Harrison, a janitor." Alan Harrison opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Walter Kingsmore. Walter Kingsmore smiled, very slightly. "Well," Alan Harrison said, "I'll be damned." "Mr. Harrison." "Forgive me, Ms. Hart. I am 71 years old, and I have been on boards for 32 of those years, and in all of that time, I have never once, not once, had a fraud brought to my attention by someone who was not paid at least $500,000 a year to find it. Please do not take offense if I take a moment to recover." "I take no offense." "Does this janitor have a name?" "Ethan Calloway." "Is he in the building?" "He is 2 floors down." "Bring him up." Lila hesitated. "Mr. Harrison, I had asked him not to be present for Ms. Hart. I would like to meet the man who just saved the board of this company from filing a fraudulent bankruptcy. If that is an imposition on him, I will apologize to him personally. Bring him up." Lila looked at Walter Kingsmore. Walter Kingsmore nodded. She picked up the phone on the side table. The phone in the Fern room rang. Ethan had been sitting in one of the green leather chairs with his hands folded in his lap, the way he used to sit in the waiting room at the pediatrician's office, doing nothing, waiting for a word. The cold coffee was still in its mug on the table. He had not drunk any more of it. He picked up the phone. "Calloway." "Ethan." Lila's voice, low, steady. There was something behind it he couldn't read. "Can you come up?" "Is it over?" "Finch is out. The filing is off. The chairman wants to meet you." He closed his eyes. "Ethan." "I'm here. Come up." "Lila, I'm wearing a funeral blazer over a cleaning shirt, and I've been awake for 26 hours. "You look fine. Come up." He hung up. He stood. He looked at himself in the reflection of the window one last time. The blazer was a little tight across the back. The shirt was clean. His face was his face. There was nothing to be done about any of it. He rode the elevator to 43. He walked down the long walnut hallway, past Lila's office, past the general counsel's empty office, past the door to the document storage room where Gerald Finch had let himself in with an intern's badge. He stopped outside the boardroom. Gabrielle, Lila's assistant, was standing by the door with a tablet pressed against her chest. She looked at Ethan. She did not ask him who he was or why he was there. She had clearly been briefed. "They're ready for you," she said. "Thank you." "Mr. Calloway?" "Yes." "Whatever you did, thank you. My cousin works on the mezzanine. She has 3 kids." Ethan nodded. Gabrielle opened the door. He walked in. The room was 15 pairs of eyes, and every pair of them was on him. He felt for one bad second the way he had felt at 19 when his first girlfriend's father had opened the front door and looked at him. Then he put the feeling down because he had no time for it, and he walked to the empty chair at the foot of the table, which was the chair Walter Kingsmore had been sitting in, and Walter Kingsmore had moved to make room for him. Ethan sat. Lila said, "This is Ethan Calloway." Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Alan Harrison, at the far end of the table, cleared his throat. "Mr. Calloway," he said. "Yes, sir." "How long have you worked for this company?" 7 months, sir. I work for Brightline Facility Services. They have the contract for the night cleaning of this building." "What did you do before Brightline?" "I worked at a restaurant supply warehouse for 4 years, sir. Before that, I was in accounting for 4 years at a mid-sized firm called Marin and Vogel." "Why did you leave accounting?" Ethan looked down at his hands. He had answered this question perhaps 100 times in his life, at parties, at school pickups, at the bus stop where other fathers sometimes made small talk. He had a short version and a long version. The The short version was family reasons. The long version was almost never worth it. He decided, in the way you decide things sometimes without deciding them, to give the long version. My wife got sick, sir. Our daughter was 4 months old. I could not do 80 hours a week at a firm and also be the parent my daughter was going to need. My wife died when Maddie was 11 months old. I never went back to accounting. I took night jobs because night jobs meant I could pick Maddie up from school. The room was quiet. Alan Harrison said, "I am very sorry, Mr. Calloway." "Thank you, sir." "How did you come to read the document in the Oak Room?" "I was cleaning it on Tuesday night. The binder was open on the table. I noticed a line item that didn't look right. I went home and thought about it for 2 days. Last night I came up to the 43rd floor and knocked on Ms. Hart's door." "Why did you knock?" Ethan hesitated. "Because I had been watching her for 2 days, sir. Not in a strange way. She stood in the lobby on Tuesday morning, after the announcement, and her hand was shaking. I told her to sit down. I thought about her all week. I thought, if I have information that would help her, and I don't bring it, and the company files tomorrow, I would not be able to look at my daughter." A woman halfway down the table, with silver hair cut short, was writing something on a legal pad. She stopped writing. She looked up. "Mr. Calloway," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "My name is Diane Ogundel. I am the independent director on this board's audit committee. I have read financial documents for a living for 35 years. I would like to understand specifically, what about the circled line item made you suspicious?" Ethan looked at her. He thought, she is testing me. He thought, good. "Ma'am," he said, 3 things. The first was the amount. 341 million is a clean number. Genuine liabilities tend not to be clean numbers. They tend to be specific and awkward because they come from real contracts. When I see a round number on a reclassification, I want to know where it came from. The second was the footnote on page 6, which said the portfolio was 94% leased. An asset that is 94% leased is not a liability. You can argue about an asset's value, but you cannot argue that an income-producing building is a net obligation to its owner. The third was the word pending. The memo said, pending resolution of counterparty obligations. The word pending is a word that somebody uses when they are hoping nobody asks a follow-up question. Liabilities either exist or they don't. Pending is not an accounting concept. It is a stall. Diane Ogundele looked at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, a single short laugh, like a bark. "Alan," she said, "I would like to propose that we hire Mr. Calloway." "Diane, I am completely serious. I do not know in what capacity. I will leave that to Ms. Hart and to Human Resources. But I am not going to sit at this table and allow a man with that analysis to go back to a mop." Alan Harrison looked at her. He looked at Ethan. He looked at Lila. "Ms. Hart, is there a role in the company that would be appropriate for Mr. Calloway?" "Mr. Harrison," Lila said, "there was not one this morning. I think there is going to be one by this afternoon." "Good." He turned back to Ethan. "Mr. Calloway, we have a great deal of work to do today. I suspect you do too. I will not keep you, but I would like to say something before you leave this room, and I would like to say it on behalf of this entire board." Ethan braced himself. "We owe you," Alan Harrison said. Ethan swallowed. "I am not saying thank you," Alan Harrison said. "Thank you is what you say for a cup of coffee. I am saying we, the people sitting at this table, and by extension every employee of this company and every shareholder and every vendor and every family whose paycheck comes from this address, we owe you. You may not understand yet what that means, because I do not think you have yet let yourself understand what you prevented. I ask you only to accept that it is true, and to allow us, in time, to make it right." Ethan did not know what to say. He said, "Thank you, sir." Alan Harrison waved a hand. "I told you, not thank you. Go. Ms. Hart, 5 minutes, please, and then we pick up the agenda." Ethan walked out of the boardroom. Lila walked out after him. They stood in the hallway together for a second, not looking at each other, just breathing. It was the first time all morning that either of them had been allowed to stand still. "Ethan." "Yeah. Are you okay?" He let out a long breath. "I have been better." "Was that hard?" The thing with Maddie's mother. Yes, that was hard. I don't I don't usually talk about that at work. I know. I don't usually talk about it at all. I know. He looked at her. She was still in the dark blue suit. She had not, he realized, slept. Not for 1 minute. Her makeup was still in place because the makeup on a woman like Lila Hart was a form of armor, and she had put it on the way a soldier puts on armor. Not for beauty, but for the day. The eyes underneath it were exhausted. We won, he said. We won round 1. Is there a round 2? There are probably rounds 2 through 9. The board has to decide what to do about Finch. We have to unwind the reclassification on the books. We have to talk to our lenders. We have to figure out if Finch was acting alone or if he was working with somebody outside the company. Because if he was working with somebody outside the company, they are going to be very surprised this morning. And surprised people do unpredictable things. Right. But yes, we won round 1. Good. She looked at him. Go home, she said. Pick up your daughter. Sleep. I can't go home. I'm on the clock until 3. You are not on the clock. I just called Brightline. You are on paid leave for the rest of the week. Lila. You are not arguing with me about this. Lila, He stopped. Okay. Okay? Thank you. Don't thank me. Go pick up your daughter. He turned to go. Ethan. He turned back. The chairman meant what he said. I know he did. I meant it too. She didn't wait for him to answer. She pushed the boardroom door back open and stepped inside, because there was a company to run and a man named Gerald Finch to disassemble and a set of books to rewrite, and she did not have the luxury yet of the things she was feeling behind her eyes as she looked at Ethan Calloway in the hallway outside the room where he had just, in 5 minutes, broken several years of her belief that nobody was really ever coming to help. The door closed behind her. Ethan stood in the hallway alone for a minute. Then he walked to the service elevator because even now he could not quite bring himself to take the main one. And he rode it down to the basement and he changed out of the blazer and the pressed shirt and back into his own clothes, jeans, a Henley, a battered gray coat. And he clocked out for the first time that day, and he took the bus home in the middle of the morning, which he had not done in 7 months. Maddie was at school. Mrs. Acker had taken her at 8:45, punctual as always. The apartment was empty. Ethan made himself a cup of coffee, a decent one this time, in his own kitchen. He drank half of it standing at the counter. He looked at the note he had left her on the salt shaker, which was still there, which she had read and left in place, and under his writing she had written, in the careful, looped handwriting of a 7.5-year-old. Okay, Daddy, love Maddie. P.S. I miss you. He set the cup down. He stood at the counter for a long moment with his hand over his mouth. Then he walked into his bedroom and lay down on top of the covers without taking off his shoes, because if he took off his shoes, he might not wake up in time to get her at 3, and he closed his eyes, and for the first time in 28 hours, he slept. Leela did not sleep. Leela spent the rest of the morning in the boardroom, and then in her office, and then on the phone with outside counsel, and then in a conference call with the 2 banks who held mortgages on the Westcliff buildings, both of whom were extremely relieved, and then in another call with the head of investor relations, who had been drafting the bankruptcy announcement for 3 weeks, and now had to draft a different announcement. She ate a protein bar at 1:15 because Gabrielle stood over her desk and refused to leave the room until she did. She drank 4 cups of coffee. She made a list of 11 things she needed to do before the end of the day, and did 9 of them. At 2:40, Martin Obie knocked on her door. Come in. He came in. He sat down across from her. He set a thin manila folder on her desk. Martin. Ms. Hart. What did we find? He wasn't alone. She closed her eyes. Tell me. Gerald Finch received wire transfers totaling $800,000 into a personal account in the Caymans over the last 90 days. The originating account is controlled by a private equity firm called Ashfield Lane Partners, based in Miami. Ashfield Lane is the same firm that was registered on the 14th of last month as the entity planning to acquire the Westcliff portfolio at auction following the bankruptcy filing, at a projected price of approximately $190 million. Lila opened her eyes. 190? Yes. And the portfolio is worth 894? Yes. So they were planning to walk away with a $700 million asset for $190 million. Yes, Ms. Hart. She sat back in her chair. And Ashfield Lane Partners, she said. Who runs that? Its managing partner is a man named Richard Voss, who is, by the way, the brother-in-law of Gerald Finch. She laughed. It was not a happy laugh. Of course he is. There's one more thing. Tell me. Voss and Ashfield Lane are not strangers to this company. In 2022, they made an offer to acquire the Westcliff portfolio outright for $300 million. Your uncle rejected it. Because it was insultingly low. Yes, Ms. Hart. The rejection letter is in the file. It is 2 sentences long. The second sentence is, kindly do not contact this office again regarding this matter. She almost smiled. She could hear her uncle in those 8 words. Martin. Yes. This is not a restructuring scam. This is a hostile takeover dressed up as a bankruptcy. Yes, Ms. Hart. They waited until Uncle Donald died. I believe so. They waited until Priya was out of the country. Yes. They planted Gerald Finch 9 months ago on a contract that would reward him for destroying the company, and they paid him $800,000 on the side to quietly move $341 million of real estate off the asset side of the ledger so the whole thing would look like a train wreck to the board. Yes, Ms. Hart. And they almost got away with it. They got within 14 hours of getting away with it, Ms. Hart. She was very quiet for a long moment. Martin, she said, if that binder had not been left on the table in the Oak Room on Tuesday night, if Ethan Calloway had not used to be an accountant, if he had walked past Lila Hart in the lobby instead of telling her to sit down, if any one of those 3 things had gone differently, where would this company be in 30 days? Auctioned off in pieces, Ms. Hart, for 50 cents on the dollar, 2,600 people out of work. Your uncle's name on a bankruptcy filing forever. Yes. May I speak freely? Always. The thing about Mr. Calloway is not that he used to be an accountant. Plenty of people used to be accountants. The thing about Mr. Calloway is that he stopped on a marble floor to tell a stranger to sit down. That is not a skill. That is a person. Lila looked at Martin Obie across her desk. Yes, she said, that is a person. She stood up. She went to the window. She looked out at the afternoon light on the river, and she thought about a man lying asleep in an apartment somewhere across this city in clothes he hadn't changed out of, and a 7.5-year-old girl who drew horses that looked like dogs with long necks, and a note on a salt shaker that said, I miss you, and a chairman who had said, we owe you, and a dead uncle who had taught her, without meaning to keep an eye on the people nobody watched. She stood at the window for a long time. Then she turned around and she said, Martin, call Ashfield Lane Partners. Tell them their sister company is, as of this afternoon, the subject of a referral to the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Tell them that any attempt to contact any employee of this company, including me, is to be routed through our outside counsel. Then call the Wall Street Journal. The Journal, Ms. Hart. Yes. You're going public with this, before somebody else does. I want our version of the story on the front page tomorrow morning. I want every employee in this building to open their phone and read that Halston Reed is not filing, and why. Martin nodded once. Yes, Ms. Hart. He started for the door. Martin. He stopped. Tell Mr. Calloway when he comes in tomorrow that I would like to see him at 10. Yes, Ms. Hart. He left. Lila turned back to the window. Outside, the afternoon had gone gold. Somewhere in the middle of the city, a janitor was sleeping with his shoes on, and a 7-year-old was getting out of 2nd grade, and a man named Richard Voss in Miami had about 2.5 hours left before the worst phone call of his life. And she, Lila Hart, 29 years old, 10 months into a job she had not been ready for, was standing at the window of the office that had been her uncle's, and realizing for the first time since the funeral that she was going to be able to do this, not easily, not gracefully, not alone. But she was going to be able to do this. She put her forehead against the cold glass for a second, and she closed her eyes, and she let herself feel very quickly the weight of everything that had almost happened before she set it down and went back to her desk to keep working. Ethan woke up at 2:47 in the afternoon with his face mashed into a pillow that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and the low, cold weight in his chest that always arrived after he'd slept during daylight. For a long second, he didn't know where he was. Then he heard the radiator knock in the hallway, and he remembered. His apartment, his bed, the middle of a Friday, a note from his daughter on the salt shaker. A boardroom 2 miles away, where a man he had never spoken to had said, "We owe you." He rolled onto his back and stared at the water stain on the ceiling, the one shaped like Australia, and he tried to make his hands believe that the last 30 hours had actually happened. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He reached for it. A text from Mrs. Acker. "Picked Maddie up at 2:35. She had a good day. She says you owe her a donut. I'll bring her home at 3:30. Drink water." He almost laughed. He typed back, "Thank you. I'll be home." He sat up. He put his feet on the floor. He was still in his funeral blazer shirt, wrinkled now, and his work pants. His socks had holes in both heels. He stared at the holes for a moment, then got up and walked into the kitchen in his bare feet and drank a glass of water standing at the sink, because Mrs. Acker had told him to, and because Mrs. Acker had been right about everything for 7 years. The apartment was the same apartment it had been yesterday. Small, clean. The refrigerator hummed. Maddie's horse drawings were still tacked above the workbench. A container of leftover spaghetti was still in the fridge. There was nothing in this apartment that announced anything had changed. And yet, he set the glass down. He thought, I might have a different job on Monday. Then he thought, I might not. Nothing is signed, nothing is real yet. And he made himself sit with that because he had learned, over the last several years, that the difference between a man who survived disappointments and a man who didn't was how fast he let himself believe in good news. He made another cup of coffee. He drank it at the kitchen table, looking at the note. "Okay, Daddy, love, Maddie. P.S. I miss you. You." He touched the P.S. with his thumb, and then he folded the note carefully and put it in the little tin box on top of the refrigerator where he kept every note she had ever written him, which was 80-something notes now, and he closed the lid and stood there with his hand on the tin for a second. The key turned in the lock at 3:31. Maddie blew into the apartment the way she always blew into anything, full speed, backpack flopping, hair everywhere, one shoelace untied. "Daddy." "Hey, Bug. Mrs. Acker said you were at work early." "I was." "Mrs. Acker said you had a meeting." She said the word like it was a foreign spice she had just tried. "With bosses." "I did, sort of." "Did you get in trouble?" "I did not get in trouble." "Did you get a promotion?" He looked at her. Mrs. Acker was in the doorway, wry, in her purple fleece, her cane in one hand and Maddie's lunchbox in the other. She raised one silver eyebrow at him and mouthed, "I have no idea where she's getting this." Ethan looked back at his daughter. "I don't know yet, Mads." "Well, if you do, I want a celebration." "Deal. With donuts." "Obviously. The chocolate ones with sprinkles, not the plain ones, because the plain ones taste like paper." "Chocolate with sprinkles." "Noted." "Okay." She dropped her backpack on the floor, walked up to him, climbed into his lap without asking, and put her head against his chest the way she had done every day since she was old enough to do it. She smelled like crayons and the lunchbox and the particular warm, dusty smell of the inside of a first-grade classroom in February. She was not small anymore. She was getting too big for this, and she knew it, and so did he, and neither of them was ready to say so. Mrs. Acker set the lunchbox on the counter and let herself out quietly. Ethan closed his eyes and rested his chin on the top of Maddie's head. "You okay, Daddy?" "I'm okay, Bug." "You feel kind of shaky." "I'm a little tired." She considered this. "You want to take a nap with me?" "I already slept." "I'll draw you a horse." "Okay." No. At 6:40 on Saturday morning, the Wall Street Journal ran the story on the front page. Below the fold, but above some extremely nervous economic analysis, under the headline, "Halston Reed pulls bankruptcy at 11th hour as fraud allegations roil board." Ethan did not read it. He had never subscribed to the Journal, and he had no plans to start. But his phone started buzzing at 6:52, and it did not stop buzzing, and by 7:15 his voicemail had filled up with messages from people he had not spoken to in years, including his college roommate Ben, who he had last texted at Thanksgiving, and a woman named Carla, who he had once gone on 2 dates with in 2017, and his old boss at Marin and Vogel, who had left him a long, slightly emotional message that began with Ethan, I can't believe, I just read the, and then trailed off into a cough and a promise to call back. Ethan turned the phone to silent and put it face down on the counter. He made Maddie scrambled eggs. She watched him scramble them with the kind of intense, narrow attention that 7-year-olds bring to questions of whether the eggs have any of the gross parts, which, in Maddie's taxonomy, meant any visible white. He scrambled them very thoroughly. He served them with toast. She ate both pieces of toast and most of the eggs, and declared him the best egg chef on the block, which, she added fairly, was a pretty small block. At 9:15, his phone, still face down, buzzed a different kind of buzz. He flipped it over. Lila Hart. He stepped into the hallway. "Hey, did you see the journal?" "No, I've been avoiding the phone." "Probably wise." "Ethan." "Yes." "How's Maddie?" He looked through the open kitchen door at the top of his daughter's head, bent over a piece of paper at the table, tongue out in concentration, drawing something that was either a horse or a dog with a long neck. "She's good. She's drawing." "Good. How are you?" "I slept 3 hours and the board hired a new chief restructuring officer over a breakfast meeting this morning. So, about as well as could be expected." "Who'd they hire?" "Priya Ramesh." "Your CFO. She flew back last night. She landed at 4 in the morning. She walked into the boardroom at 8 o'clock, still wearing her morning clothes, and asked for coffee and an explanation. By 8:40, she had both. She has agreed to take on the restructuring role on top of her CFO duties until we stabilize. She is probably going to fire 14 people by end of next week, and none of them are going to see it coming, and they are all going to deserve it." "Sounds like she's good." "She is very good. She was my uncle's best hire in 30 years. "Ethan." "Yeah. I meant what I said about 10 o'clock. "I know you did." "Can you come in?" He thought for a second. "Yes." "Okay." "Lila?" "Yeah." "What am I walking into?" A pause. "A conversation," she said. "That's all. A real one. Not a meeting. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you want, and you are going to ask me some questions about what I can offer, and we will figure out together whether there is a shape to this thing. You are not on trial. You do not need to bring the blazer." "I was planning to burn the blazer." "Burn the blazer." He dropped Maddie at Mrs. Acker's with a kiss on the top of her head and a promise to be back by lunch. He took the bus. He wore a navy sweater over a collared shirt and his one pair of good jeans, and he felt for the first time in a long time like a person instead of a uniform. The lobby of Halston Reed Tower at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning was different from the lobby at 9:17 on a Tuesday morning. Only one security guard was on duty, a young man named Carlos, who Ethan had nodded at 100 times without ever learning his name. Carlos looked up, saw Ethan not in cleaning clothes, and his mouth fell open approximately 3 inches. "Mr. Calloway?" "Hey, Carlos." "Dude, I'm going up to 43. Yeah, Ms. Hart's assistant called down. "Go ahead." He held out his hand across the desk. I read the thing, the journal thing." Ethan shook his hand. "Thank you, sir," Carlos said. "Seriously, my mom cleans this building on Sundays. Different contractor. I told her this morning, I was like, one of ours did something, you know? One of ours." Ethan did not know what to say to that, so he said, "Tell your mom I said hi." "I will." He rode the elevator up. Main elevator this time. All the way to the top. Gabrielle was at her desk outside Lila's office, in weekend clothes, a camel sweater and jeans, her tablet in front of her, and a paper cup of coffee in her hand. She stood up when she saw him. "Mr. Calloway?" "Ethan, please." "Mr. Calloway," she said firmly, "until Ms. Hart officially reorganizes you into a title that is not janitor, you're going to be Mr. Calloway in this office, and I would appreciate it if you would let me do that." "Okay?" "She's on the phone. About 2 more minutes. You want coffee?" "I would love coffee." "Sit." He sat on the long gray bench opposite her desk. She brought him coffee in a real ceramic cup, not a paper one. It was good coffee. He sipped it slowly. He watched the door to Lila's office through the glass. She was standing at her window, phone against her ear, one arm across her chest holding the opposite elbow, her head tilted to the side in the way people tilted their heads when they were being told something difficult. After about 90 seconds, she hung up and turned and saw him. She gestured him in. He stood up. He nodded at Gabrielle, who smiled without quite smiling, and he went in. Lila closed the door behind him. Sit down. He sat. The chair across from her desk was leather and deep, and he sank into it the way you sink into an airplane seat on a long flight. He held the coffee cup in both hands. She did not go around the desk. She sat in the other chair next to him, the one set at an angle, and she crossed her legs and she looked at him. How did she sleep? Like a rock. She didn't know anything was different. Good. Who was on the phone? A small, tired half smile. Richard Voss's lawyer. Richard Voss has decided he would like to cooperate with the investigation. That was fast. Yes, his wife, as it turns out, is Gerald Finch's sister. The family is, as of this morning, not speaking. Mr. Voss would prefer not to go to federal prison alongside his brother-in-law. It turns out that when you pay someone $800,000 in wire transfers, the trail is actually quite easy to follow if anyone looks, and the United States Attorney's Office is, at this moment, looking. So they're done. They're going to be done. It is going to take several months. There will be charges. There will probably be a trial, although I would bet on pleas. But yes, they are done. The Westcliff portfolio is already being reclassified on our books as of close of business yesterday. The banks are happy. Kingsmore Pacific is happy. Walter called me at 6 this morning to read the journal piece to me out loud over the phone from his porch in what I believe were still his pajamas. He mispronounced your last name. I corrected him. He apologized. He asked if you were free next Saturday. For what? The pony. Ethan put the coffee cup down. Lila. I know. Lila, he does not have to do anything. He wants to. He likes you. He likes that you stopped to tell me to sit down. He actually said this. He said, that is the kind of man I want around my great-granddaughter. I am quoting. Ethan laughed. He couldn't help it. It was a short, startled laugh. It came out of him almost against his will. Okay, next Saturday. He'll send a car. Lila, don't say no. Maddie will never forgive you. He shook his head. He looked down at his coffee. He looked up. Okay, he said. Okay, thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Walter. Now, let's talk about what we're actually here to talk about. She uncrossed her legs. She leaned forward slightly. She looked at him the way she had looked at him last night across the fern room table when she had asked him if he was sure, and he saw again how young she was, and how tired, and how much she was not letting any of it show. Ethan, I want to offer you a job. Okay. I don't know yet exactly what the job is. Okay. I know some things about it. I know it is not a cleaning job. I know it involves a salary that will allow you to stop worrying about school lunch money. I know it is going to report to me for at least the first year, because I don't want you buried inside an organizational chart where somebody can forget who you are. I know it is going to involve, I am going to use a word and I want you to hear me out before you react. It is going to involve integrity oversight. He raised an eyebrow. Before you laugh? I'm not going to laugh. You look like you're going to laugh. Leela, I am a man with an accounting degree from 9 years ago and a mop from 7 months ago. I am not a fraud investigator. I am not asking you to be a fraud investigator. We are hiring 2 of those. I am asking you to be something I do not yet have a word for. I am asking you to be the person in this building whose job is to listen to the people nobody listens to. I'm asking you to be the person who walks the floors at odd hours and talks to the maintenance guys and the mailroom people and the late shift assistants and hears the things that never make it into a report. I am asking you to have a standing meeting with me once a week in which you tell me what you have heard. I am asking you to have an office on this floor with a door and a salary that starts at $110,000 a year, because that was the midpoint for a role at that level before the freeze, and I see no reason to offer you less. I am asking you to have full health insurance for you and your daughter starting Monday morning. I am asking you to bring the thing that you already are, which is a man who notices, to a company that almost died because nobody was noticing. She stopped. He did not say anything for a while. Lila? Yes. That's more money than I've ever made in my life. I know. By a lot. I know. I don't, I'm not sure I'm worth that. She looked at him for a long second. Ethan, she said quietly, do you know what the insurance payout on a chief restructuring officer's malpractice is? No. It is less than what you saved this company yesterday, by a factor of about 30. You are worth this. I am not paying you for what you did. I cannot pay you for what you did. What you did is not the kind of thing you can put a number on. I am paying you to keep doing what you did. That I can put a number on, and that number is, in my professional opinion, conservative. What about... He stopped. He tried again. What about Maddie? What about her? I have been a night shift guy for 7 years because I needed to be there when she woke up in the morning and when she came home from school. I cannot be a 9-to-5 guy, Lila. I cannot. Not even for this. I will not have her raised by Mrs. Acker while I go to meetings. I just won't. I know. And I'm not negotiating. I'm telling you, I cannot. Ethan, I know. He stopped. You can work the hours you want to work. You can start at 10 if you want. You can leave at 2:30 if you want. You can work from home on Fridays. You can take her to every pediatrician appointment. If somebody in this building gives you grief about any of that, you tell me, and I will handle it, and they will not give you grief about it twice. I am not interested in your hours, Ethan. I am interested in your judgment. You can exercise your judgment on a train platform at 11 at night for all I care. He was quiet. Lila. Yes. Why are you doing this? She looked at him. She looked at him for what felt like a long time, and he noticed, as he had not really let himself notice before, that her eyes were a specific shade of green with a kind of brown ring around the pupil, and that when she was thinking, the muscle in her jaw worked very slightly. Because you knocked on my door, she said. That's not an answer. It's part of one. Do you want the rest? Yes. The rest is that I have spent 6 months being surrounded by people who wanted things from me. Advisors, lawyers, vendors, distant cousins, my uncle's old poker buddies, a few ex-boyfriends I had forgotten about, approximately 200 recruiters. Every single one of them wanted something from me. A contract, an exit, an introduction, a favor, a chance. You walked into my office on Thursday night not wanting anything. You were scared, Ethan. I could see you were scared. But you did not want anything from me. You had already decided you were going to lose your job if I took it wrong, and you came in anyway. Do you know what that is worth to a person in my chair right now? No. It's worth this conversation. He looked at his hands. I don't know what to say. You say yes or no. He took a breath. Yes. Yes? Yes. Okay. She exhaled. It was, he realized, the first time she had exhaled in about 10 minutes. Okay. Gabrielle has the paperwork. HR will walk you through it on Monday. Don't sign anything today. Take the weekend. Show it to a lawyer if you have one. Show it to Mrs. Acker if you don't. I'll show it to Mrs. Acker. Good call. A silence fell between them. It was not an awkward silence. It was something else. Ethan became aware, in the middle of it, that he had not really looked at Lila Hart in the 2 days he had been standing in rooms with her. Not the way a man looks at a woman. He had looked at her the way you looked at a person whose house was on fire, which was how you looked at people in crisis, which was the only way he had ever let himself look at the executives in this building. But the fire was out now, or at least it was out in this particular part of the building, for this particular morning, and in its absence he suddenly saw her the way he had maybe half seen her in the lobby on Tuesday, before he had known her name. She was looking back at him. She did not look away. It was he who looked away first, at his coffee cup, at his own hands, at the corner of her desk where the leather portfolio from the boardroom was still sitting. I should go, he said. Okay. Maddie's with Mrs. Acker. I remember. I told her I'd be back by lunch. Go. He stood up. She stood up with him. At the door he paused with his hand on the handle. Lila. Yes. Thank you. Stop thanking me. I'm not thanking you for the job. I'm thanking you for Thursday night. For what about Thursday night? For letting me in. She looked at him. Ethan, she said, you have it backwards. You knocked. Somebody had to open the door. She did not answer that. He let himself out. He nodded at Gabrielle, who handed him a manila envelope with his name on it in neat printed letters, and he rode the elevator down and he walked out through the lobby, where Carlos lifted a hand in a small shy salute, and he stepped out into the cold, bright Saturday morning with the envelope tucked under his arm and a feeling in his chest he did not have a word for yet. He got on the bus. He went home. Maddie met him at the door with a drawing in her hand that was, by her account, a horse named Pancake wearing a hat, and he sat on the floor of the kitchen with her and admired it from every angle. And she asked him if the meeting had gone okay, and he said yes, and she asked him if they were having donuts now, and he said yes, and they went down the block to the donut place that had been there since before she was born, and he let her pick out 3 instead of 2, and she talked the whole way there and the whole way home, and he listened to every word of it, and somewhere in the middle of her explaining to him why her friend Sasha was currently her best friend, but also currently on probation, he caught himself smiling at nothing in particular, and he did not put the smile away this time. He just let it stay. Winter loosened its grip on the city the way winter always did, one day at a time, without making an announcement, and by the middle of March the mornings had turned the pale, hopeful gray of a season that had not yet decided to be spring. Ethan walked Maddie to school in a coat that was still a coat, but no longer the coat, the heavy one, the one he had worn every morning for 7 years. He had bought a new one in February with his second paycheck. It was navy. It fit across the shoulders in a way his old one never had. Maddie had given it a full inspection on the sidewalk outside the apartment the first morning he wore it, walked around him twice, and pronounced it acceptable for a grown-up. He had a small office on the 42nd floor now, 2 doors down from the fern room. His name was stenciled on the door in gold letters, the way Robert A. Finnegan's name had been stenciled on the door of the general counsel's office, and underneath it, in the same small gold type, was his title, which Lila and he had argued about for an entire week before settling on Director of Operational Oversight. He still did not love the title. He tolerated it. Gabrielle had started calling him Ethan, mostly when no one else was around, and Carlos from security waved at him now in the lobby, as though they were old friends, which, in a way, they were. The Halston Reed of that spring was not the Halston Reed of the Tuesday morning when an announcement had emptied the lobby. Priya Ramesh had, as Lila predicted, fired 14 people by the end of her second week and hired 11 over the following 2 months, and the building at 9 in the morning had a sound to it now that it had not had in a long time, a kind of low, even hum of people who knew what they were doing and had decided to keep doing it. 2,600 jobs had stayed. 43 mortgages in the Westcliff portfolio had stayed. Walter Kingsmore had renewed the partnership agreement for another 10 years in a small ceremony in Lila's office that involved 3 glasses of whiskey and a pen older than Lila herself. Gerald Finch had taken a plea in February. 4 years. He would serve about 30 months. His brother-in-law Richard Voss had taken a plea a week later, 18 months, cooperating. Ashfield Lane Partners had been dissolved in what the financial press called an embarrassingly public unwinding. Ethan did not read the coverage. He had learned by then that reading about the people he had helped catch did not make him feel the things he was supposed to feel. It mostly made him feel tired. So he did not read it, and he did not go to any of the hearings, and when a reporter from a magazine left 3 messages on his voicemail asking for an interview, Ethan called back once politely and said no, and that was the end of it. What he did instead was his job. He walked the building. That was at first the whole of it. He had spent 7 months walking the building at night with a mop bucket, and now he walked it in a sweater during the day, with a small black notebook in his back pocket and no particular place to be. He stopped by the mailroom. He stopped by the cafeteria. He stopped by the loading dock where the delivery drivers unloaded at 4 in the morning and the loading dock manager, a woman named Rochelle with a laugh that could be heard from a floor above, had declared within the first week that Ethan was good people and had started saving him a cup of coffee on the days he came through. He stopped by the cleaning closets on odd floors, where Marcus, the night shift holdover, had eventually worked up the nerve to ask him, only once, whether he still remembered the names of the people he used to work beside. Ethan had said, "Marcus, I would be a very bad man if I didn't." In his weekly meeting with Lila, he would sit across from her at the small round table in the corner of her office, the one she had brought in when she finally admitted that she did not actually like sitting behind the big desk. And he would open the notebook and read from it, and she would listen. He would tell her that the new contract with the building's window washing vendor was costing them 23% more than last year, and that the vendor's invoices kept arriving 2 weeks late, and that he had a hunch the two things were related. He would tell her that a junior analyst on the fourth floor had come into the mailroom in tears on Tuesday because her manager was taking credit for her work in ways that were not subtle, and that he had not intervened because it was not his place to intervene, but that he thought Lila might want to know. He would tell her that the cafeteria was losing money because the new food service contract had built-in pricing that nobody on the procurement team had actually read. He would tell her things that were not in any report, and she would write them down in her own notebook. And by the following Monday, 9 times out of 10, something about each of them would have quietly changed. It was not a glamorous job. It was not the job he would have picked if a list of possible jobs had been handed to him. But it suited him in the way a pair of boots suits you after you have broken them in, and he found himself, by April, looking forward to Mondays for the first time in his adult life. Maddie thrived. This was the word Mrs. Acker used, thrived, and Ethan had at first thought she was overstating, and then had begun to notice, with a father's slow and guilty attention, that she was not. Maddie had been a happy child already, as children went, but a happy child whose father was not tired all the time was, it turned out, a different kind of child. She started asking for friends to come over. She started reading books that were too long for her and finishing them. She started, one evening in March, correcting Ethan's long division at the kitchen table, which she had picked up from a book about a girl detective. Ethan had looked at her in a kind of stunned silence and said, "Maddie Calloway, did you just catch me in a math mistake?" And Maddie had said, "Yes, Daddy, and also your 7s look like ones. You should work on that." Walter Kingsmore had, as promised, sent a car. Maddie had met a pony named Biscuit at the Coastal House on a cold, bright Saturday in February, and she had loved Biscuit with a ferocity that had made Walter laugh so hard he had to sit down on a hay bale. She had also loved Evelyn Kingsmore, whom she had declared, on the drive home, cool, a word that in Maddie's vocabulary was not handed out lightly. Evelyn had agreed to be her pen pal. They exchanged letters, on actual paper, once a month. Maddie's letters were largely about school and horses. Evelyn's letters were largely about business school, which she had gone back to, and which she suspected she was going to finish this time. Ethan and Lila circled each other for a long while. That was the only honest way to put it. He was not a man who rushed into things, and she was not a woman who had the time, in the first 100 days of a turnaround that everyone in the financial press was watching, to do anything rushed. They worked together. They trusted each other. They developed over those first months a shorthand that made Gabrielle roll her eyes affectionately from her desk outside the door. Ethan began, without quite noticing when it started, to bring Lila a cup of the good coffee from the 39th floor kitchen when he came up for the Monday meeting. Lila began, without quite noticing when it started, to ask him about Maddie before she asked him about anything else. It was not a love story that happened fast. It happened, instead, in the small ways such things happen between two adults who have each already lived enough of a life to know better than to hurry. It happened in a Tuesday evening in late April when Lila had stayed late to finish a filing and Ethan had been on his way out and had stopped in her doorway and said, "Have you eaten?" And Lila had said, "I have not eaten since lunch." And Ethan had said, "There's a Thai place 3 blocks down that has a corner booth." And Lila had looked at him over the top of her laptop for a long second and said, "Give me 10 minutes." It happened in the slow walk to that restaurant, in the cold air, under the streetlights, in the silence that neither of them felt any pressure to fill. It happened over the green curry when Lila told him, for the first time, about her mother, who had left when Lila was 6, and about her Uncle Donald, who had not left, who had shown up instead with a duffel bag of her favorite books on the second night and had slept on her father's couch for 3 weeks until her father had stopped crying. It happened when Ethan told her, for the first time in anyone's hearing, about Maddie's mother, whose name was Anna, who had laughed like a saxophone, who had known she was dying before the doctors had, who had written Maddie a stack of birthday letters to be opened 1 per year until her 18th. Anna had been gone almost 7 years. Ethan did not talk about her, but he talked about her that night at the corner booth with a woman he had known for 4 months. And the woman did not interrupt and did not fill the silences and did not look at him with the specific kind of pity he had learned over 7 years to see coming from across a room. She just listened. When he finished, Lila said, "Thank you for telling me." Ethan said, "Thank you for listening." And that was the whole of it, that night. They did not kiss at the corner booth. They did not kiss outside her building when she got into the cab. They did not kiss for another 2.5 weeks, in fact, when Ethan walked her to her building on a Friday night in May after they had gone to a jazz bar with Evelyn and Evelyn's new boyfriend, and they had danced badly, and they had laughed about the dancing, and on the curb outside her lobby, Lila had looked up at him and said, "Ethan, you are going to have to be the one to do this, because I am technically your boss." And Ethan had said, "Lila Hart, you are not technically anybody's boss" at 11:30 on a Friday night. And then he had leaned down and kissed her, and she had kissed him back, and it was not perfect, and it was not cinematic, and his coat sleeve had gotten caught on her purse strap halfway through, but neither of them minded because it was not the kind of kiss that needed to be perfect. It was the kind of kiss that needed to be true. Maddie found out a month after that. She found out the way Maddie found out everything, by paying attention, and she announced her findings at breakfast one Saturday morning over a plate of pancakes, saying, "Daddy, are you and Miss Lila dating now? Because Sasha's mom said that's what it means when a man buys a woman flowers on a Tuesday, and I saw the flowers on Miss Lila's desk on Tuesday when I came to your office after school." Ethan had set down his coffee very carefully and said, "Mads, we were going to tell you this weekend," and Maddie had said, "Well, now you don't have to. Pass the syrup." Later, when he asked her if she was okay with it, she had considered the question seriously for almost a full minute, the way she considered all important questions. And then she had said, "She is a nice lady, and she doesn't talk to me like I'm little, and she likes horses." So yes, Ethan had called Lila at 10 that night after Maddie was asleep and told her what Maddie had said. Lila had been quiet for a second and then had said, "I just cried a little in my kitchen over a 7-year-old I've met twice." And Ethan had said 8.25, and Lila had laughed, and then Lila had cried for real for a minute. And then she had said, "I'm going to come love that child very well, Ethan, if you'll let me. I need you to know that." And Ethan had said, "I know." They built it slowly over that spring and summer and fall. He did not move in with her, and she did not move in with him. Maddie kept her room across the hall from Mrs. Acker and her yellow toothbrush in her yellow cup and her horses on the workbench over the kitchen table. Lila kept her apartment and her CEO's hours and her bad habit of answering email at 1 in the morning. But she came to Sunday dinners. She learned that Maddie liked her eggs scrambled very thoroughly. She learned that Mrs. Acker did not believe in plants and that it was not worth arguing about. She brought Maddie a used copy of a book about a girl who ran away from home to join a traveling circus of horses, and Maddie read it twice in a week. In October, on the 1-year anniversary of the day Ethan had knocked on her office door, Lila gave him a small wrapped box at the end of a Monday meeting. Inside it was a brass key. "To what?" Ethan had asked. "To the fern room," Lila had said. "I had them put a new lock on it. Nobody else gets a key. I thought you should have one." It was a small thing. It was an almost silly thing. But he kept it on his keychain from that day forward, and every time his hand closed around it in his pocket, he thought about a night in February, in a green-walled room with a yellow legal pad and a woman in a long cardigan, and the particular feeling of a door that had been shut becoming a door that had been opened because two people had decided, for no very defensible reason, to trust each other. Here's the truth he had learned from it, which he told Maddie one evening that winter, in the particular words a man uses with a child he wants to be honest with. "Most of the people you will pass in your life," he told her, "will be walking around carrying something heavy. They will not tell you what it is. They will not put it down to shake your hand. They will smile at you, and they will keep walking, and you will never know. And most of the time, all they need is for one person, any person, to notice that they are tired and to say a small true thing. Not to fix them. You cannot fix anybody, Maddie, but to see them. That is the part we forget. To see them." She had thought about this, sitting cross-legged on her bed with a stuffed horse named Pancake in her lap. And then she had nodded very slowly and said, "So like when the lady was in the building and you told her to sit down." "Yes, Bug, like that." And then she became Miss Lila. "Yes." "Did you know she would?" "No." "Then why did you do it?" Ethan thought about it for a long moment. He thought about the lobby on that Tuesday morning, and the marble pillar, and the way her hand had been shaking, and the 74 ways he could have walked past her and gone on with his life. He thought about the binder on the table in the oak room 2 days later, and the 74 ways he could have closed it. He thought about a note on a salt shaker. He thought about a mop bucket with a squeaky wheel. Because, he said at last, when a door opens for you, Mads, and you don't know where it goes, you still have to walk through it. Otherwise, the door closes and you spend the rest of your life wondering what was on the other side. And that wondering is a heavy thing to carry, heavier than walking through. Maddie nodded. She said, "Is that a grown-up thing?" "It is." "Tell me again when I'm bigger." "I will." She lay down. He pulled the blanket up to her chin. He turned off the lamp and he stood in the doorway for a second, looking at her in the dim light from the hallway, the particular shape of his daughter's head on the pillow, the thing in his chest that had been there for 7.5 years and that he had, somewhere in the last 11 months, stopped bracing against. Downstairs, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He knew, without looking, that it was Lila texting him goodnight. He would pick it up in a minute. He would text her back. Tomorrow was Monday. He would bring her the good coffee. She would have the notebook open. They would do the work, like they had done it every Monday for a year, like they would do it every Monday for as long as there was work to do. He closed Maddie's door most of the way. He walked down the short hall to the kitchen. He picked up the phone. "Good night, Ethan," the message said. He stood at the counter in his own kitchen, in a small apartment that was still the apartment he had come home to for 7 years, and he typed back with 2 fingers the way he always did. "Good night, Lila." Then he set the phone down and he turned out the kitchen light and he went to bed. The city outside kept on being a city. The building at 1200 Park Avenue kept on being a building. Somewhere, in a small office on the 42nd floor, a gold-lettered name waited on a door for a Monday morning. And the man whose name it was, the man who had been a janitor, the man who had told a stranger to sit down, the man who had knocked on a door when he had every reason to walk past it, slept in his bed beside a window that looked out at nothing in particular, dreaming, as most tired, happy men dream, of nothing at all. And that, in the end, was the whole of the story.